what gets your attention when you're looking in places, I guess, and who ends up standing out to you that ultimately might end up being a relationship that you can build work around at some point?
Something that really stands out for me is if they can show that they understand our business and that any advice they provide is something that I'm going to be able to directly communicate to the business, and that I don't have to spend a couple of hours translating it.
Yeah.
The reality of in-house legal work is that it is very different from private practice. And I know when I was in private practice, I always thought I was providing relevant commercial practical advice. And then I went in-house and I realized how far off the mark I was. It can be really hard to understand until you're in it. But if that step can be removed, where I don't have to be the intermediary in terms of being able to understand the advice, that's something massive to me.
So is that about how things are communicated, or because is that in the way that they communicate? Is it the way that they put themselves out there? Is it their accessibility? How does that actually translate into? Because a lot of lawyers, they want to build better relationships and better serve in-house counsel, and people talk about commerciality and all of these kind of buzzwords which don't mean a lot. But yeah, how does that effectively translate into something that you will think, wow, this makes my life a hell of a lot easier? Is it legal design? Is it their communication style? Yeah. What is it?
It's sort of an element of all of it. One of the things that I have tended to find from advice that we've received from externals, particularly in sort of previous lives, is that you often present of text. When you're in house, you don't want that. Most of the time, the business, they want to know, can they do it or can't they do it? And if they can't, what are the other options?
Yeah.
And that information is tending to be in those advices, but you kind of got to dig around to find them.
Yeah.
So as lawyers, we obviously have to do all of that prep work, and that's fine. And that's great for me to have. But what we really need is something really concise and simple at the start that says, these are the answers. And if you don't have the context of the business, that can be harder to do. But I would prefer to have a phone call or conversation at the start of, engaging the external law firm, so that they can ask as many questions from me, so they get all the information they need, so that they can then provide that, because that's much easier from my perspective than trying to play catch up after the fact, where I've got this advice and then I have to sort of pull out the relevant information for the business.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. I actually see the way that a lot of lawyers communicate, and I try to help clients change it, actually, even in simple things like content and blogs and other things like that, that it's not telling a story to get to the end and then you tell what the outcome is at the end, but actually you've got to invert, and actually these are the key bits you need to know, and now I'll tell you about the why. And funny enough, though, because of a lot of the way we're taught and case studies and a lot of the way we go about things with the way we frame advices and so forth, it's like laying out your reasons why, and then in a learned way based on those reasons why, saying it. And it's just thinking about better ways to communicate that, because you're right, most people want the top line, and you still need those reasons why for lots of different reasons. But for you to make your life easier, it's not to fish through it and try to work it out. And also, I guess if you can pass something on without having to double handle it, it just makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, and we're pretty good at this in Australia at using plain English, but there is a difference between plain English directed at lawyers and plain English directed at the business. because there are so many terms that don't really mean anything to most people.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I'm certainly conscious of and is really useful if our legal providers are conscious of that too.
So you were working from home beforehand, and then this explosion of work happened within the business, and obviously then COVID happened with lockdowns, and you're a mum of two. How did you manage the full-time practice, full-time work with everything else, and how do you continue to with a big smile on your face like you've got today, Kate?
Well, once I figure it out, I will let you know. When we went into our first lockdown last year, I was only working 3 days a week, I think it was. And so that wasn't too bad. I was sort of managing it relatively well with the homeschooling. At work, we also were given unlimited leave if we needed it to help with everything else that was going on outside of our work lives. And one of our standard Slack statuses is actually parent duty. So you can just pop that on and while you're sort of dealing with other things. By the second lockdown, I was working 4 days a week. And I think even only that was our long lockdown, and not long into that, I actually went up to full time. And I think the only way that we managed that was a huge amount of support from my workplace and also from my husband's workplace, and flexibility. So my husband he actually took a day a week off, but worked 4 days over 5 days. And I utilized the parent duty Slack status so that I could sort of supervise. The theory here is that unless you're actually needed for a particular meeting or something, it doesn't really matter when you do your work. And we also have the availability to us to block out our calendars for things if we know it's sort of coming up. This year has been trickier because my son is in prep, and anyone that has tried to help a prep homeschool knows that it's not a matter of sort of set and forget. Like, you've got to be with them the whole time. The really big thing for us has been to try and keep some form of routine. Yeah. So we try and do the schoolwork relatively early in the day. I throw the kids outside for a little while. And we also embrace that you kind of get interrupted and you kind of have to make it work. Between the two of us, it's not been the easiest thing, and there have been countless times that we've been interrupted during calls. I mean, my favorite one was an external meeting last year. We had asked for a bit of quiet from the kids. So my son opened the door during this meeting and asked if flushing the toilet was going to be too noisy. When I assured him that no, it was fine, he came in not long after wearing absolutely nothing except a pair of boxer shorts, asking me to help him get dressed again. But I think everyone's in the same boat. So yeah, as long as you can kind of laugh along with it, and try and set boundaries. So my non-negotiable is I always have dinner with the family, and I always do their readers. That's the one thing that I do every night with them.
Yeah.
And then if I have to, then I might log on back, afterwards for a little while they've gone to sleep. But really trying to create those sort of that barrier between work and life, even when in reality it's becoming very blurred.